Welcome back to the shop. I'm your host, Matt Roach, here with my buddy TJ from TJ Leather. TJ, my guy, thanks for jumping on.
Of course, brother. I am super happy to be here. We've been talking about this for a couple months, and we finally made it happen. It took some work, especially now with all the technology issues we're having, but we're here. What's up,
I
everybody?
know we made it. Technology, it's not as fun as you think. There's too many things going on to have it sound decent costs us so much money and like a lot of know-how.
Dude,
And they make it seem like it's so easy. Like just record, it's fine. Yeah, no, I get confused at least once a week.
I was having this sort of like mental breakdown yesterday, if you will, this existential crisis, because I've been putting out a lot of videos for one of the podcasts that I recently started, and my little MacBook Pro that's 4 years old has been just fighting for its life. And I'm scoping out Mac Studios, like high end Mac computers, which are extremely pricey, but then also doing the math of how much it would cost me to build my own computer, which would be a fraction of the cost. But I'm like, what?
Dude, just get an iMac.
Well, and
I
that's,
bought an iMac like a year, maybe like 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago. It was the best decision I ever made.
yeah. And I think, honestly, even though I can definitely build a computer for probably an eighth of the cost of what I want to pay for one of these high end Macs, the fact that I was literally able to take everything we were doing now, because when I first called you, I had you on Bluetooth into a podcast recorder, into my phone. It was just wild. Like I was able to unplug a couple things, change a couple of like different settings on my computer, and boom, we're live. And I'm scratching my head thinking, I don't know if I can do that with a PC. And for me, when it comes down to the wire, like when we are 5 minutes from recording and I need to make those changes, that's worth every penny.
Yeah, 100 like honestly, I mean there's people who are PC people and there's Mac people. And if you have the technical understanding, PCs are amazing. They're absurdly customizable. You can do anything. But for the people who aren't engineers or understand the intricacies, it's it's hard. And building it too, you don't have the same warranty. You're running your own operating system, and those interfaces don't always work with, some of these. They'll work fine with Amazons and big things, but they're not always going to work with the small podcast, thing that you're using to record. It's not always going to work on those interfaces. Sometimes they're running off Linux. It just gets infinitely confusing. So for me, I always found it just extremely, easy just to run with and honestly, the iMac wasn't that expensive. I mean, it was like, relative compared to what some Apple products can cost.
How
It can get
how
very
much did you pay
expensive.
for it?
I want to say when it was all said and done, like $1,200, $1,300.
For an iMac?
Yeah, they're not expensive. I bought it right from Apple too. I didn't like buy it like third party or anything. I want to say it was like 12, $1,300.
Whoa. Yeah, I was
I just drove up to the store and bought it. Like no issues, no nothing. And I customized. Well, actually, no, I ended up buying there, but it had to get shipped to me
Mhm.
because I did up the RAM. That was the only thing I ever do is I always add the max RAM, whatever I can,
Yeah, and that's why I was specking
because
out the
that just makes sense.
the Mac Studio, and it is something ridiculous. It's like
They're like
128
five
gig.
grand.
Yeah, I mean, bro, there's gonna come a point that I'm paying that much, and it's gonna be worth it because
Think of all the leather machines you could get for 5 grand.
yeah, but
You could have the workshop of your dreams with 5 grand, or you could just have one extremely expensive machine. It depends on
and
what your fantasy is, but you
well,
could get like 3 or 4 really good machines.
it's funny that we talk about that we're starting to delve into this here now, because that's showing my shift into my leather crafting journey, and we'll cover more about it. I just want to tell you a story that I drive the fire engine at work, and every time we drive past somewhere that I see like a nice workshop or like a cool garage, I always fantasize and I tell my crew over the intercom, I was like, dude, check out that garage, imagine the things I can do if I set up that leather workshop there. And my best friends in the world, like, they immediately jumped on my throat. They're like, listen, dude, You can have the biggest shop in the world you want, but it's just you. You're still going to be backed up. Like, quit your dreaming,
Yeah.
work a little bit harder, and make do with what you have. Like, they're always good for just grounding me in the most brutal way possible, which is one of the reasons I love the fire service so much, because we cut through so many layers of appropriateness and general politeness to just say things for the people that you care about. You just tell it like it is, and you go under the assumption that, hey, these people care about me. They might have just called me the biggest asshole on earth, but it's from a place of love.
Well, firefighters are like they're so undervalued for the sheer fact of they get dragged to so many useless things. And then you expect them to just like go scale like a 20-story building and put out a fire. It's like you have to like go there because somebody locked themselves out of their house. And then you also have to go scale it. Like the breadth of everything in between that is just like fascinating to me. Like
And I know
it makes me laugh.
we talked about it on, because I work Christmas Day, and that shift was one of the most miserable shifts I have had in a long time, owing to the fact that we had that polar vortex that came through. It froze a lot of pipes, and then Christmas Day, the temperature rose enough that the frozen and burst pipes started thawing. So now I think I sent you the video. It was a third floor apartment that had,
Oh, it flooded all the way down like
uh,
the entire
it was
building.
like a waterfall. Like I had to crawl into this little crawl space in like 3 inches of water to shut down the sprinkler system. Like the whole time, like, I love my job. I love my job. But I think that was, it was like 3 in the afternoon, and that was like the 15th call we were on that day. It
It's
was
crazy to think
exhausting.
that like with technology the way it is today, we can't shut that off from like a remote spot.
I mean, you can, but
Like it's funny, like you think like a massive building, we have to like go and like into like a crawl space to turn it off. It's like you can't like you would assume there'd be like something at the bottom of a building where you could just turn it off
yeah,
and all the water would stop for the building.
it is. You just have to crawl into it, because why do builders want to build with as little expense as possible, and they want to make it look as good as possible, so they just hide all of these things. And we get to see, it's exciting, it's interesting, we get to see the inner workings of a lot of things in the world, and just the ancillary knowledge that I've gained from things like building construction, plumbing, carpentry, things like that in the fire service, just beyond the firefighting stuff. Like, that knowledge has been invaluable.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So like that but I one thing I always find so interesting when I talk to people is the fact that almost everybody they're not just a leather worker, they are a leather worker and I think that's like the fascinating part about what makes people's work unique. We this month, in January we talked to Brian Phillips and he's a carpenter. And then, every person they have a little bit of a different story and like your work is unique because you come to it from a firefighter's perspective. So
Correct.
like, you know, tell people not only how you got into it, but how you got into some of the stuff you make is so cool, but it's so niche. It's perfect for your field. A lot of it is it actually provides real world improvement to what you guys do every day. So like, give us a little background because I find it fascinating and I don't even understand all the things that you guys use and need.
Yeah, so I kind of stumbled into the world of leathercraft because I was finishing up my rookie year. That was 10 years ago. I just celebrated 10 years as a full-time career firefighter. But I was coming to the end.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a ride. And when we go through the academy, we get issued these very utilitarian helmets. We call them salad bowls because they are fiberglass. They look like a bowl on your head. They just don't look cool, right? Like, rule number one of firefighting, or like any specialized thing that you do, is you got to look cool. So
Yeah.
all of
I
us,
mean, how can you not look
right?
cool?
I mean, that you sneakers, they look cool, right? That's why you like them. And in a similar
Exactly.
fashion, we all us recruits had our eyes set on leather helmets, which at the time they ran like $500 per helmet, and I think right now we're.
Yikes. Well, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, they do a
Are
lot.
you ready? Because right now we are up to like 1,000 plus per helmet.
What?
Yeah,
A,
it's
th- a They $1,000 for the helmet?
Yeah, for a leather helmet.
Wait, do you have to buy it?
I mean, I bought mine because the department was not going to issue me one. And
So wait, what do they issue you when you start?
the salad bowl that I was talking about, this little like fiberglass
Oh, oh.
uh, thing, it just that was one of those things that I'm like, it'll be an investment. And sure enough, like it tripled in price in 10 years. But yeah, like going back to the story, I really wanted to get that leather helmet, and they have these fronts. They have the helmet shields, and it's this ornate sort of like crown piece at the front of the helmet that tells everybody at a glance what department you're from, what station you're assigned to, and from top to bottom. Like it's usually department at the top, your station number in the middle, like in big bold numbers, and on the bottom panel you can have your last name, your ID number, or whatever. So it's part of that tradition. Like the fire service is steeped in tradition, and it kind of just called to me. I'm like, this looks so cool. Like I want to learn how to make one, because where we buy them online, they're just kind of like cheaply manufactured, literally a couple pieces of quote unquote leather. I don't know if we could call it that, stitched together with stickers instead of like actual numbers on them. And I saw that some friends of mine at the volunteer firehouse had been making their own helmet shields. So I started picking their brain. And at the same time, I found this guy, Red House Shields, out in Kansas City, Missouri, who is the granddaddy of all leather helmet shields. He like the craftsmanship is incredible, and the dude is a legend. So I said, okay, he can do this. My friends have shown me that it's a kind of high barrier to entry, but it's doable. What if I start how they did, and as my north star, as my guiding light, I'm going to have Red House. I want to be like him. I want to get to that point. And if I get to halfway where he is, then I'll be happy. And that was 10 years ago. Red House a couple years ago pretty much came out and said, "Hey, it's been a fun run, but I want to focus on family stuff now and the career." So now there's the newbies like me who have been doing this game for like 10 years. We're now kind of carrying that torch of fire service leatherwork. And it's been a ride.
So
It started with helmet shields, and then it led to radio straps. It led to all sorts of strap goods, suspenders, glove straps. And the community's been, for the most part, pretty incredible. And it's allowed me to serve a lot of the people within my niche, within my community of firefighting, and help them be better, help them be faster, help them be more aggressive. Because as controversial as this is, I am a firm believer that we as firefighters need to be the best trained and the most aggressive possible. There's a quote that circulates around that says, "If it's my kids up there trapped in a fire, I want the craziest SOB you have going after them." And in a world of firefighting where we push a lot of our own safety and be careful, oh, some people can't survive that fire, there is still plenty of room for those aggressive, knowledgeable firefighters to go in, get the work done, save the people who need saved, and just keep on that tradition of courage and service to the community.
so that's like really cool. So I guess the interesting thing is, and this is me learning on the fly about these, is does the leather, is there a different like, is there a reason why they chose leather for helmets? Is it because of something with the smoke, or it is still visible in like deep smoke, or it's more durable, or it's, you know, not as prone to brittling? Like, is there a reason why they originally like did that, or thought that that was the best way to go about like doing helmets?
Well, for that, we have to rewind to the early 1900s and sort of put yourself in that like 1901, 1903 New York City or Philadelphia, right? Like the Industrial Revolution is pretty well established. The production lines, like the processes for making things, are pretty well done. Right now you have machines that can stitch, you have machines that can use like steam or hydraulic pressure to push to do things like that, but we still don't have the technology for plastics. We still don't have the ability to mold things out of things like fiberglass. So
Hmm.
leather has been that building block for humanity for eons. And what they realize is like, oh my God, we can take this vegetable tan leather, we can shape it using a handful of different panels, a brim, and then dip it into a resin to harden it. And that's it. Because back then, the helmets were not so much impact protection as we see them right now. The helmets, the whole point was just to have that wide brim that sticks out the back to keep the hot water from getting into your coat and to keep embers from falling, in between your corduroy coat and your skin. So the materials were pretty rudimentary back then, and that tradition sort of stuck. And manufacturers realized that people love that, and as the years went on, they started adding impact caps. They started adding suspension to it to make them a little more protective when it comes to stuff falling on top of you. And it speaks volumes of who we are as firefighters, because as soon as we get a leather helmet, we literally rip out all the insides, get rid of the impact suspension, and like you're like, well, if something falls on me, it's just going to break my neck anyway. So who cares? I want this to be comfortable while I'm wearing it. But that's sort of how it started, because we didn't have the world didn't have the ability to create and mass produce those fiberglass and those plastic helmets back then. And that's been one of those traditions, because you look at those helmets that the old timers wore, and they're scuffed, they're gouged, they just look cool, right? So that's what you aspire to. You can get so much from somebody's career out of just looking at their lids, right? You see
Yeah.
they're smoke stained. You see that there's chips in some spots, and every single one of those marks, every single one of those scars has a story. It could be a bad one. It could be like a funny one. It could be one where they got caught in the bad spot and they made it out. It could be one where they got caught in the bad spot and they lost a couple dudes. So it's for me, I kind of romanticize that. It's it's just so cool. It's so cool for leather to be able to tell the story, and that's what I tell my customers, that you are going to get leather with some marks on them, with some brands, but at the same time you are going to be adding your own story to it, right? The leather comes from that animal, it gets tanned, it gets processed, it gets turned into your final product. Now it's your turn to add to that story and to make it truly yours, and to be able to hang it up at the end of your career and be like, yeah, I've been there, I have done that, and I can show you in my helmet what I've done, and in my shield.
And it still sounds like it provides protection. It seems like it's kind of a blend of modern technology and kind of, like in your words, romanticizing the past ways
Yeah,
of
it's a tradition.
firefighting.
Yeah,
So it's a kind of like it's a blended thing, and I think that's why you probably see more just the shields instead of full blown leather helmets. Like I'm sure guys
right.
use, like you said, fiberglass and other things now.
And I mean, there's a couple folks who have been trying to make their own leather helmets, and the process itself is pretty straightforward. But then it becomes a matter of how do you certify it, right? Because
Yeah.
I get killed in line of duty, and there's going to be 1,000 attorneys and 1,000 workman's comp folks crawling all over my dead body. Some people want to get paid, some people don't want to pay, and they're always going to be, that mega nerd pushing his glasses up, being like, well, he was not wearing a certified helmet. Um,
So it's about like protecting your family and making sure that
it
they're,
is, and you know what,
taken care of.
I'm a, I love my leather fire helmet. I know that it doesn't offer me the highest impact protection, but I make that conscious decision. I don't care, because I would rather carry on that tradition and offset that by being a fit, aggressive, knowledgeable firefighter, right? Because I can wait for something to fall on top of my head, or I can work really hard every day of my career to recognize the warning signs of a building that's about to come down on top of me, to hopefully stay a step ahead. And honestly, some of the catastrophic events that we deal with, a little impact cap is not going to make much of a difference, right? Like I get burnt up in a fire, like the helmet's not going to make a difference. It's by that point, conditions are so bad that it's not really going to matter. But it's just fun. Like I love the tradition. I love being able to add my own bit to those old timey helmets, and I love being able to share that with folks in my community, and teach them a thing or two
Yeah.
as we go.
And I will add the disclaimer: we don't condone non-safety approved items. Just in case anybody's out there
Yeah, don't
listening,
sue us.
we support all any and all safety approved through the appropriate channels through your local, state, and federal governments in your countries. So I feel like I got to put it out there because
Oh
there's
my
that
god.
one person who's going to take you at your word,
Oh
and
yeah, there's some.
God only knows. Yeah, and I got nothing for them to take, but
I mean, you
um,
got a couple microphones you were trying to sell me earlier.
yeah, I'd rather them go to a good home. I don't need all the extra ones, especially since they just like sit there. The good thing is microphone technology hasn't truly changed in about 40 years. Like the one I have came out like 35 years ago.
And it's incredible
And
how
it's
much it
still
goes for.
it's still top of the line because it hasn't really changed.
Mhm.
The stuff that's changed is interfaces and stuff, but the way the audio is processed, it's as clear as it can get. I mean, granted, I'm sure there is other ways that are more expensive, but that's interesting. So I learned something because I didn't really know anything about the shields, but I think it's a really cool thing. And I always love your radio straps. I think those are just like there's just something really neat about them, and it's like you said, there's a style aspect, but also they just seem like they are much stronger and better built than something you're going to go buy off the rack somewhere.
Yeah, and
Like they are stitched and enforced with like solid brass. Like if there's no corners cut, it's just like well made.
I'm really thankful and really lucky that, number one, I found the leather crafting niche for the fire service. But most importantly, that I was able to take my experiences in some really, really bad calls and work them into the products, right? Like, we're talking about a radio strap. It looks cool. I can put my name on it, I can make it look badass, but it serves a purpose. There's a study that came out years ago that says the best way to wear your radio at a fire is on a radio strap, with the radio strap under your turnout coat, under your firefighter coat, with the microphone hanging out. And let me paint a picture for those followers and those listeners who may not understand what I'm talking about. So imagine a little portable radio, right? A little walkie-talkie. But now you
Yep.
take an external microphone hooked up to it with like a 3 foot long coiled cable, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
radio can sit in one spot and you can talk and listen to on that remote speaker mic. A lot of the firefighting coats come with this little radio pocket, right? And you're supposed to put it on there and drape on the front of your coat, and you drape the long microphone cord around your neck. It's held by flimsy Velcro, and a portable radio is one of those life saving things on the fire ground, right? That's my way to call for help. That's my way to talk to my crew. That's my way for them to communicate with me when things are going south and we need to make a hasty exit. Or, when I find a victim and I need to pull them out, I'm like, yo, this one's a big one. Come give me a hand. And I have a couple friends who, I want to say it was in like 2009, they got caught in a bad spot at a fire. They were on the first floor. The fire was burning in the basement, and the sliding glass door broke in the basement, and it was a windy night. So think about it. It's kind of like a chimney, right? You have your firebox creates a draft and it goes out the top. They were caught in the top. They burned up, and they actually were wearing their coat, like their radios, on the outside of the coat. The cable that connects the remote speaker mic to the actual radio burned, so they couldn't call for help. One of them ended up like super burned. He's back on the job. He's a badass fireman. The other one jumped out of a window and got alerted the other crews, and he went back inside, so he ended up burned as well. And that's one of the many stories that I tell why it's important. I don't care if you would buy my radio strap per se, just wear your stuff on a radio strap under the coat. to give yourself that extra layer of protection, that extra level of, of
So is there a reason why they don't go to like a more sturdy strap that's not like, like, is there an actual reason for Velcro, or is it more just cost
it's just
savings? Like,
it's just a manufacturer thing. It's
is there like, is it because of like weight, or like is there any like practical reason other than, just monetarily?
not really. Like it literally it's like, hey, it's the cheapest for the manufacturers to make it that way, and they've always done it this way, so why change it? Which is fine because
Yeah.
you know what I do, like in my and this is turning into a firefighting podcast, but whatever, I love it. When it comes to, I still have that radio pocket in my coat. What I do is I put a set of lineman's cutters, like these super hefty,
Like
gigantic.
Nipex?
Yes, the Nipex, and I went through and I got the spring loaded ones because now,
Those are nice.
bro, and it's worth it because think about it. Like if I get pinned, right? You're looking at me on the camera right now. Like if I get pinned and I can't move my left arm, if as long as I have access to my right arm, I can reach my radio right here in the middle through my radio strap,
Hmm.
and then I can grab my cutters and start cutting me out because drop ceilings with cables with conduit, that stuff traps us and puts us in really crappy situations a lot when it comes down to the fire. So it's all about that self rescue and that ability to get back in the fight. And that's why I rage against the people who say that, like, we need to make firefighting safer, we need to be better about this. I'm like, dude, I've lost people in the line of duty, and this is, it's in the name. It's firefighter. Like, it's a fight. It's dirty. It's grimy. It's scary. It's gonna tax you. So you either do it and you train to the highest level, or you don't. But there's no way to oversimplify and make it safer. But I'm gonna get off my soapbox because I don't want to get fired or reprimanded. And of course,
Well, one
these are my views.
one thing you did say
What's up? Go ahead.
was that was a nice little talking over each other. You just nailed that one. The thing that we actually can bring back to leatherwork is Nipex and channel lock. I actually use those tools for leatherwork. Like I have a pair of channel lock snippers that I cut my brass rivets with. Like there is certain like tools that it makes a difference the type of tool you use. Like you can cut brass rivets with anything, and I had cheaper stuff, and then I bought like some channel lock ones, and it snips it so much easier.
Oh,
Like you can be there all day with cheap ones off of Amazon for like $4. But if you buy Nipex or Channel Lock or any of the like known brands or even some Klein ones, it makes your life easier.
it,
Like it's better to have less good tools than more that are just going to break and not work as well because you have to work harder.
and I also think that's part of the leather crafting journey because most of us come into it with little money, with little knowledge, and we just make do with what we have, right? It might be that crappy kit from Tandy that you bought 10 years ago for $80 that you're still making do with today. And eventually you're like, okay, I'm going to treat myself to a newer set of, I don't know, like the other day I got the Cinnabrox, the stitching chisels. I treated myself to those, even though I barely hand stitch anymore. And dude, they are incredible. Like I considered doing a couple like other hand stitched items after using them because they just glide through the leather like it's no big deal. And this is after using known, I think they're a craft tool. So I mean they're entry level Tandy ones that I've never sharpened, I've never polished. Like I've just been rocking with them for 10 years. And I bought these Cinnabrox and I was like, oh my God, like this is the quality that makes a difference. And thankfully leatherworking is one of those fields where you literally get what you pay for. Like you know that if you're paying top dollar for something, you are getting a quality tool.
Yeah, and I can say, and I think there's different levels too. It's funny how people, and I'm actually a proponent of like beginner kits because I think it teaches you how to think about making things. Because if you start out with the most expensive, you don't need the most expensive things to make beautiful things. I will say the type of leather you use does matter. I will say that is the problem in my experience, the type of leather you use. If you have really cheap leather, it's very difficult to make something that's beautiful, as opposed to if you're using something that's much nicer. But you can take a beginner's kit and still make beautiful products for years. Like you said, you used it for years, and there's ways to improve it. There's improvements that you can add, and you're right. Like it does. I would say it makes things easier and cleaner as you go up in the pyramid of tools. I would say it's just the crispness and the ease of making your products that you can do. Like I think you're probably using the Cinnabox and you're like, wow, I don't have to hit as hard.
Mhm.
Or those stitching holes look really crisp.
Yeah.
And it makes my stitching look slightly better. You know what I mean? Look a little bit cleaner. It's the little niceties on your way to the Birkin bag level quality. And that's not for everybody. That's not what everybody strives to, but I will say that's in terms of what you consider as the finest of everything. You can really get entry level, but I think the other thing that's hard too is there's so many companies that make products that starting out that was the most daunting part. And I hope people listening that either are already in this field or are thinking of getting into it learn what things they do and don't need so they don't waste money. And that was the thing I learned quickly. Like you buy things you're just never going to use
Yeah.
and you don't need. And it's the Instagram effect where you go, ooh, that's pretty. It's like you don't need that.
Or if you're like me, I am a tool geek. I will see something and in my mind, I will talk myself into what project could I make to be able to use this tool just because I want it. And I have a
Yeah.
graveyard, probably worth thousands of tools by this point, that I bought them. I use them for one or two things. And then I just have
And
no
then
use
you
for
have
them.
no use for them now.
And but I also think that's testament to the growth. Yeah, I can look at it and be like, I spent so much money on these. But I think it's testament to my growth within the craft that I have been able to slowly start whittling away a lot of that extra junk, that like trimming the fat, if you will, that I have been able to change my process to need the minimal amount of tools, the ones that I know and trust, and just focus on pushing out the best items that I can with those tools.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is most people will start with hand tools and then you work your way to see which larger machines do you actually need that are going to make the most impact in your work.
Correct.
Like I know we've talked before on machines, and I know you have a class 26, right?
I went straight for the class
class
4.
class 4? Okay, and you got that pretty early on, and it's like, but you knew which things were going to make the most impact on the work you do.
Well, and
You know what I
also
mean? So it's like you learn that.
let me again step back up onto my soapbox because I see this a lot on groups, especially the Cobra machine group. People get on there and they're like, "Hey, I just bought this machine. How do I use it?" And it blows my mind that somebody dropped thousands of dollars on a machine that can do so much and they haven't even done the research. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to be like me, but my time is valuable. I can turn my time into money. So that takes a lot of work. So by the time that I'm ready to drop a pretty penny on an expensive machine, you can bet that I bought my machine in 2020, beginning of 2020. I had been researching it probably since 2018. I had been reading
Yeah.
about it. I had been seeing what people could do. I knew what bobbins had used. I knew how to wind a bobbin. I knew how to thread the machine before I even had one. Because it's to me, it's just foolish. I'm like, oh my God, like that's the equivalent of me, like of the department hiring me and being like, okay, get on this fire truck, like with zero training. That on their end, that would be a horrible mistake because they're not investing in me. And I'm just going to show up and be an absolute bumbling idiot. And
So I think there's two things. Like I think you could look at it from the other side too. And it's not that like I'm sure there are some people who don't do their research, but I think there's a lot of people who will get a machine and it's intimidating. if you're not like, I think the difference is too is you're mechanically inclined,
Kind
so
of.
you understand. Yeah, but you understand the majority of things at their face value. So like you can see and you can understand like why these pieces go here, and there's certain people who probably are fantastic leather crafters, but they come at it from the more artistic side.
Correct.
So there's people who do beautiful hand stitching and make beautiful products, but the thought of a machine is so intimidating that no matter how many videos you watch, it's just going to be like a panic attack. So I think they just want that person on the other side to be like, "Hey, it's all right. Like, let's talk it through." It's the community aspect that I think is one of the more positive things about leathercraft is there's people who are willing to help. So I always play devil's advocate to not disparage people, because I'm sure they probably did do their research to find out what machine was best for them. But it was even intimidating for me, and I'm lucky I had friends who could walk me through. But there was a ton of things when I first started going on it that I could not explain, that if somebody hadn't done all those hours on the machine beforehand, I'm not sure I would have like figured some of these things out. Like I had weird things where I had like 40 feet of thread that was like going from my top needle and somehow weaving into the hole to the left of my bottom bobbin without me knowing. And it was still stitching. So it was like double pulling it down and it was just extra thread.
Right.
And then at one point, I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't working at all. And I took it all apart and I took out this massive baseball sized wad of thread in there. And I was like, how is this even possible? But like the average person's not going to know that. I think it's just, and the one thing I will say is I can't speak for all companies, but when I got mine from Leather Machine Co., it was like ready to ride. It was like getting a brand new car. You just put the key in and
Oh
go.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like it was like anybody could do it. I think people need the fine tuning help, which Al Bain has those videos and he's great, but also his knowledge is so above the average person that I think even his videos are hard sometimes on certain aspects because he just like instinctively knows every aspect and just goes through it.
Well, so a couple things to say about that, and I have noticed on the group that he and Bruce Band run that people get so upset with them. They're like, "You are being like so mean to us." And I see Al's and Bruce's point that they literally have to repeat themselves every single time. And I think a lot of the
Wait, what
issues,
what group is this?
it's like leather.
Is it like a Facebook
Yeah, it's a
group?
Facebook group where it's all
Oh,
about leather machine company equipment. So if you have a question about your Skyver or your strap cutter or your Cobra, whatever it might be, there's somebody who's you're gonna be able to find the knowledge. So it's a little more niche down, and it's
yeah, because I found his videos to be amazing.
oh, I love his videos. But and going back to what I was saying, how do you think he gained that knowledge, right? And this is where I don't want to say it's sink or swim, but like it's sort of the same way that I talk to my rookies. It's like, listen, just try it. Just try something. You're probably going to fail. I've been there. I have failed. And we build up from that. Translate that to using these machines. Just give it a go. Like you said, they come ready to stitch. Don't start changing things. Don't start moving anything. Give yourself those quick wins. Hey, I'm going to stitch the outside of a belt. That's it. Okay, now I know the noises the machine makes. Now I know what moves. Now I know what doesn't move. So you're building that baseline, that foundation of, okay, this piece normally moves. If it stops moving, that's bad. This piece doesn't move. If it starts moving, that's bad. And then eventually you can maybe tweak some things. But dude, I will tell you, I've been rocking this machine nonstop for years. I don't think I've adjusted the tension. I haven't changed anything. I added a couple things, and changed my needle and lubricated. Added a ton of stickers because that's the only reason I buy machines, so I can put stickers on them. But that's it. Like that thing is a beast. And
Yeah,
I'll,
and I think the other thing too is they're just so helpful. Like anytime I call, like like Dave will hop on the phone or Heather or anybody, and it's like they just like explain it, like, which is just honestly, it's kind of unique in like the modern day. Like, I can't call Samsung and get a live person who's going to explain to me why my phone is only working in this mode
Right.
at this time. Like, you just call and they help, and it's like that. It's unique because that level of knowledge is rare. Like the amount, like they have so much experience with things that like even when I was starting it up, like they were so supportive and like so nice and like just wanted to like explain things. And he's like, "Yeah, here's my cell. Like, just call me. Like, if you have questions, like, let me." He sees it as an extension of himself and the people there. And I think Al Bain probably feels the same way.
Oh
Is
yeah.
like this is like their Mona Lisa. Like this is what they're leaving with the world of teaching people how to sew and make handcrafted things, and the things they'll make, they'll take pride in knowing that they taught they're like a teacher,
And
you know?
you pay for that. A lot of folks will get upset about
Yeah.
the price point and say, "Oh, I can get the Chinese leather shoe patcher for $80 on Amazon." My counter to that is number one, you have to do a lot of work up front to get it running. And number two, you do not have that support where you can call the manufacturer and ask them a question, right? Like we call Leather
Yeah.
Machine Company, like you said, and they will sit there for hours and walk you through it. To me, that's worth paying for. To me, that like you can't beat.
Also, the quality is vastly different. Like when I got it, it was almost 350 or 400 pounds of solid steel. And on the cheap stuff, it's usually soldered like it's just thrown together. Like it's not very repairable.
Yeah,
This, you if you burn out the motor, you just rinse and repeat. I think it's like 200 or 300
yeah, you
bucks, and you
swap
just
it.
take it off and put on a new
Yep.
one. Like there's no if you take care of it, there's no reason you'll ever have to buy another machine.
No, it's a beast. Like the Cobra machines
Like
are
with regular
beasts.
maintenance, you don't have to ever, and they sell every individual part. So if you break one small part, like $12 and you can get going again.
Yep. Yep.
I think people realize, and I was a person that did that at the beginning too, where I would buy things. I'm like, oh well, it's $40 or $50, and here's a great example. So I bought the um what was it? It's like the cheap eBay one that you can use your grommets and your punches and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I had that, and it was fine. Like I've used it for years, and Weaver, one of our partners, like they sent me their Master Tools version. And well, it's funny because I was talking to them and they were like, well, like, what's something you'd like to like see or use, like, to try? And I was like, well, like, I'd like to see, like, I'm just kind of like a nerd. It's like seeing what's better. Like, I already have a machine that does it, but I like to see if there's one that does it better and like more efficiently and less work. Like the other one, like you have to have like some serious biceps to like get through stuff. Like it's got a really short arm and you get a
And
workout.
it
Like if you're
faces
doing like
away
more
from you,
than like
right? Like the arm.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is so frustrating. Like I'm like pushing down with all my might and I come up like upstairs from like, the garage working and my wife's like, "Why are you sweating?" I was like, "Well, I was trying to use this thing and like it does the job." And then I got the Little Wonder, the Master Tool one from Weaver, and I was like, oh, so this is how it's supposed to be.
Bro, I love the
Like I'm
fact
not
that
supposed to like fight for my life to get like things done. And like, yeah, they both do the same thing, but there's a difference in how they do it. And you know, it's just easier to just pull. And the thing is, they're not the only one. There's many machines on the market, but for a certain need, it makes sense.
yeah, yeah, I love being able to pull towards myself. I love the
Yeah, that's a
multiple
big thing.
attachments. Um, I love the fact. Well, everybody should bolt their machines down. I made that mistake once, almost chipped a tooth because I was using the old one, like the Tandy one that you push, but like the arm faces away from you, and it
Oh
kicked
yeah, yeah, yeah.
out of the clamps that I had to clamp to the table with, and it like clocked me in the chin. I saw stars for a bit. I was like, okay, something needs to change.
And if you can't like actually bolt it or screw it to your actual table, say you're short on workspace like I am, what I do is I take 2x4s or plywood, and I drill it into that. I'll usually use like a thick piece of plywood, like something heavy duty, and then I get good clamps. Don't get cheap clamps. Get like decent clamps. Don't buy the $2 ones at Harbor
Because
Freight. And
your
if you're
life
going to go to
depends
Harbor,
on
there's
it.
nothing wrong with Harbor Freight, but get the more expensive ones. Like get something that actually has a solid grip and grip it to your bench because, like you said, it hurts.
Yeah.
Like you have to do that. And I actually, I have to go to like I have it like hooked up to my like bench, but I want to get different plywood for it because I was surprised at how small the Little Wonder was.
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be bigger, and then it came in, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's it's a." It was pleasantly surprised because I thought I was going to lose more benchtop space,
Yep.
and I didn't lose anything. And the main reason I actually wanted it for was punching holes.
Simple.
There's just something weirdly nice about like being able to like just punch quick holes like on a belt or like just dragging it across and like just going click, 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 click.
Oh,
Or
dude.
like,
You know what you need for that one? The rotary puncher. Like the hand
I've seen
crank
that one.
one. That, again, talk about machines that
I can't justify that because I don't. That's for people who do like belts on a production line.
Yeah, it's
Like you got to have a reason for it. And the problem is everything's so expensive that like, but what's funny? It's not even as much about money as it is about. I have a really small workshop, so I have
Yeah.
to use every square inch that I have, and like if I bring in another like full scale, like tall, like bell skiver or anything like that, I need to get rid of workbench space.
Yeah.
Because it goes from floor all the way up, 5-6 feet. So that's where it gets really difficult. Where if you have a finite amount of space, it gets hard after a while. You have to kind of move things around and.
But I also
get
think
creative.
exactly that's what pushes that creativity of being able to take your tiny space and let your mind wander and figure out the perfect process. It's doable. And I'm not saying I'm the example because from a like streamlined point of view, my shop is a catastrophe. I have to make multiple trips across just to get different things, but that's just because that's how the cards fell. It's tiny. We're in an old house, so plaster and lath walls. It's kind of a pain to bolt things to the walls, but it's doable.
Yeah.
Like if I can do it and do the things that I do, it's definitely doable.
The one thing I do want to caveat before I forget is if you end up getting, if somebody gets a Little Wonder or any of the presses, Buckle Guy has them, they all have them, and you already have attachments, be sure to check to make sure your attachments work with the machine you're going to get.
Yes.
So for instance, if you have all Weaver ones, it's going to work and it's going to work fine. But if you have stuff you got either from Buckle Guy or you have it where you bought them on eBay, like there's tons of like ones you can buy, but they're not all going to fit.
Bro,
So
I wouldn't even bother, to be honest
do
with
your
you.
research to make sure like you can do that because you want to make sure that you can get the most benefit out of whatever machine you use with the money you've already invested.
Yep. And think about the fact that you're buying an ecosystem. Yeah, the machine sits at the middle, but all the different attachments have to go with that machine. And
you'll spend more on the attachments than you will the machine. It's like a tool. Like if you're going to buy Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, Ryobi, any of those, you're buying into the ecosystem.
Yep.
Once you buy, the tools are cheap. It's the batteries where they get you.
And you can't be angry if you buy a DeWalt tool and you're like, oh, my Makita batteries don't fit on it. Where it's like, obviously, bro, like,
yeah,
duh.
I mean, sometimes there is overlap though. Like sometimes you can use stuff like interchangeably.
Oh yeah, and it all depends on how squirrely you want to get and how. Like I remember my dad was helping me,
or how engineering friendly you are, because you can get very creative and make tap dies you can interchanged. If you have all those skill sets,
bro, I took a flat file and I made things work. Like it is the most like rudimentary caveman style, but for what I needed at the time, it worked. Like every time I used the setter, like a little like metal shaving would fall into my project. But you know what? It saved me a lot of time. And I think that's part of
you got to get creative.
It is, and it's that's one of the exciting things about leatherworking, that it pushes your skill in so many fields beyond the leather crafting itself.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's true. And also leather crafting and is the same as like it's like carpenters, anybody who works in the tool industry, you end up accruing a lot of stuff because there's so many niche uses, there's so many niche tools that you use. And if you have a small place, like I know that anything that comes in this house, I need to have a reason why it came into this house because my wife is going to look at me sideways and go, "Serious?" When the Weaver one showed up, my wife just looked at me and she goes, "What's in there?" She didn't even care about if I paid for it or not. She just goes, "What's in there?" Like she didn't. And the funny thing is, she wasn't mad. She just like kind of smirks at me. She's like, "What'd you do?" And I'm like, "Ah." Like, why couldn't they have delivered it to the garage, not the front door? Come on.
Dude, I think our
Like,
significant
you're killing
others
me.
take such a beating when it comes to our craft. Like, I have my
Yeah.
girlfriend has been a godsend when it comes to just processing stuff. I can give her a stack of belts, and I'm like, "Hey, I need you to punch out the ends because this is going to take me forever." And like, she just like runs through them, and I'm so thankful. But I also get the same sideways look. She's like, "What else did you buy? Where are we going to put it? What's that box?" Like, and like there was a time that I was
Yeah.
stacking. I had a huge project and I was stacking Weaver boxes in the dining room, and she's like, "Listen, dude, even if it has to go on your side of the bed, I want it out of the dining room." And I'm like, tail between my
I got
legs.
relegated to a corner. I have this little corner, and it's the most organized corner I've ever seen in my entire life. I think I've sent you pictures. The wall I have all the way up and down the walls that IKEA Scadis set
Yep,
with those little like clear containers of all my like attachments, all my like buckle guide, like hardware and all that stuff. And it is and I make changes constantly. I'm now putting my creaser, I'm mounting it underneath my desk and I'm drilling holes so that my handles will sit propped up with the tips facing up that I can use them at any time by just taking them out, using it, and then dropping it right back into the hole because then it doesn't use my desk
that's
space.
awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, I
Like that's where my mind goes. Like I just like wander off and I'm like, this is how I can do this.
you have to, and that's one of my favorite parts of leather crafting is that, like I said, it pushes the creativity, but it also forces you to create these processes, right? I come from an
Yeah.
engineering background. I went to school for all that stuff. Obviously, didn't use it because now I'm a firefighter. But I love,
You use it in different ways, though. I feel like everything you do in life you use, but you don't know how you use it. You may not be paid for it, but that knowledge it builds on who you are. Like I'm sure it comes in handy when you're in a building and you're like, all right, I understand how like these are built.
and I mean, I did electrical and computer engineering, so it's not your traditional like structural or fluids or stuff like that. But ultimately, hey, it's what I wanted to do, and it gave me that understanding and appreciation for how processes should go, and it's something that it's so much more exciting when I get to apply it to my leather crafting, to the things that I enjoy doing, instead of sitting behind a desk and being like, "Oh my god, I'm doing agile software processes, oh my, validation, verification." Like, bro, shoot me now. I just it
I like how you said that you weren't like, mechanically inclined and then like 10 minutes later you go, "Oh, by the way, I have a an electrical engineering
bro, that's
degree."
different. Like,
You just were so low key about it. Like, no, like I'm not really mechanically inclined, but I am an electrical engineer by
look,
trade. Like, get out of
I
here.
I know my boundaries. Like, I am best behind.
You slow played that like you were just sitting with a pair of aces and you were just like, yep, check, check,
Oh, that's the
check.
thing. Like, I barely even like. There are some people in my shift that still have no idea I went to college because it doesn't matter. It's like it's a past life, and it's yeah, it helps shape who I am. And I work with some folks who need to like beat their chest and say, "Oh my god, I got a doctorate. I got this." It's like, bro, it has no bearing whatsoever on what we do. At the end of the day, for me, I am a firefighter, and my job is to fight fire and drive the fire engine, and I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. And mic drop type thing. But what I was talking about the
You know,
processes when, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, you can go.
Uh, it's that the leatherworking kind of scratches that itch for engineering, for a structured process, for a defined way of accomplishing things. Like when it comes to, let's say we're tooling leather, right? There is
Yep.
overall a very defined way of doing it, right? You take your leather, you case it, you wait till the moisture content is just right, you use your swivel knife, you tool it, you let it dry, you stain it, you go on from there. So for me, I love being able to take that structure and understanding, okay, these are the steps that I need to follow, but then being able to play with them. What if I add more moisture? What if I add less moisture? What if I wait X amount of time? What if I just rush the process? How can I tweak it and change it? Because I'm a contrarian and I'm not a big fan of authority, which is kind of shocking that I ended up in a fire service career because we have a very defined line of authority. And when people come out and say, you have to do this, like for example, the saddle stitching, man, I used to get into like fights with people online all the time because they say, you have to do saddle stitching because it is the strongest. And if you lose a stitch, it's going to suck. So never buy a machine, saddle stitch all your stuff. I'm like, homie, I have been making stuff for firefighters for almost a decade now. And I use a machine, and these people put my items into the most hellish conditions on earth. And I've never lost a stitch. And it hasn't been some catastrophic failure. Like, I pushed it.
I think you just like arguing.
I mean,
I
I
think it's
told you,
just
dude,
part of your nature. Like I've gotten to know you, and I think it's just your personality. Like I think if you get bored if you can't just argue with
well,
somebody.
it's
Like I think you just like fighting to fight. I don't even think you're not like a mad person by nature. You're actually like a super jovial, like easygoing guy. I think you find weird, sick joy in just arguing for the sake of arguing.
it's not quite that, and I'm not a. I don't like arguments just for the sake of them. I just hate the fact that people will follow a dogma for no reason other than it's what they were told, right? And that's I everywhere I go, everything I do, be it in the fire service, be it in the leather crafting world, I want to encourage people to think for themselves and to use these building blocks to come up with their own way of doing things. Right. So,
Yeah.
I can sit there and yeah, I can hand stitch wallets and it's going to be beautiful saddle stitching. But when it comes to me stitching a radio strap, there's no point. My time is valuable. And when push comes to shove, those stitches are going to be fine if I use them with a machine, right? If I do them with a machine. And uh,
It's a priority. I think it's where you value. And one of the nice things I actually remember from like when I first got to know you, you don't really push your opinions. I know it's probably not going to come across in this episode, but like when I first met you, you helped me learn some stuff about the clicker presses and like what they're good, like what they can and can't do, and just basic stuff, and like how to go about it and all this stuff. And like there was no like agenda. It was just genuine helpful, and you didn't know me from a hole in the wall. And I think there's that aspect that I want to come across, because I think it's the genuine aspect that you bring is that you had no agenda. You wanted to help. You gave me like information that you had found helpful, and you were like, "Hey, this is some good stuff. I use this one, but to each his own. Like whatever you think is going to work best for what you do in
exactly.
the end." And it's like, and that's helpful. Like that helps people make informed decisions. And
Exactly.
to your point of like thinking, it's like that helps, because that was like, okay, like I think this fits the situation that I'm going to use it for. And it's helpful. And now I've had it for a couple years and it's great. So it's one of those things where it's like, I want to make sure it's like conveyed, because there is like an aspect where it's helpful. It helps people, yes, make decisions on their own, but also it's teaching. I think it's in a weird way, you probably would have been a good teacher, because I think you would have wanted best. And I think it's probably the same thing in public service. You can say anybody who works in healthcare, education, police, firefighting, anything that's a public service related profession, you want what's best for people traditionally.
You do.
Like you usually go into those because they're not the highest paid professions. You don't go to those like I work in research, and if I went to pharma, I could make double what I make. It's like I don't you go there because you instinctively you feel like you're trying to help make the world a better place, whether it's small or big or just by doing paper pushing or anything. You feel like you're doing something to move things forward. And I think if people take anything from this, I want them to be like, like he is trying to help educate and people grow to the best of their ability.
I think that there are very few absolutes in the world. There are very few things that are black and white. When it comes, and
I would agree
I
with
have
that.
learned this from the fire service, we operate in the gray. There are some things that, yes, thou shalt, otherwise X, Y, and Z will happen. But there is a lot of stuff that you have to make those like instantaneous decisions and be able to see them through to the end. And that is something that I have been, and we'll get back to the teaching here in a bit. That's something that I push when I help people with leather crafting is like, listen, you might be hearing that thou shall only do this technique. I'm coming here showing you that I am the embodiment of trying something different. So what I want to encourage you to do is try. Don't
Yeah,
take
you
my
may
word
fail, but
for
just give
exactly.
it a try.
Don't take my word for it. Don't take the guru's word for it. This is like this is your road. There's so much information for leatherworking out there, and this one goes out especially to the beginners. There is a ton of information out there, and that's why it's important to validate your research. Meaning, try it, fail, or succeed, whatever it is. Just try it. You have to learn those things, but you have to try them. I see it on the groups all the time. Somebody will ask a question, and there's going to be a guru who comes in and says, "You shall take my answer as gospel." And that's where that contrarian, that fighting instinct comes out. That I'm like, nah, dude, like find your own way. Like leather crafting is a choose your own adventure game. Like I am living proof of that. I A lot of my methods are unorthodox. A lot of the things that I do will shock a leather worker. I mean, Albane probably hates me because I put so many stickers on my machine and because I don't tweak my tension like he suggests. But it works for me, and
Yeah.
it's important to take
The
those.
other thing, it's an expensive hobby too, or craft or profession. I understand why people ask a lot of questions. Leather is not cheap.
It is, and you have to be able to find. And this is now that we're going to the teaching part because I ran into that. I ran into those issues of not having the money to try and not getting the answers that fit me from the groups, from the forums. I'm trying, like, my goal for 2023, and one of my driving forces is being able to consolidate the knowledge in my sub niche, right? Leather crafting is a pretty niche world. Fire service leather crafting is even more niche. And what I'm going to do is take that knowledge, take what I have learned in a decade's worth of fire service leather, consolidate it, and give it to people, right? I launched this website called the Leathercraft Academy, where I want to take beginners from knowing nothing about leather within the fire service and getting them those quick wins. Be able to make your own helmet shield, be able to make your own glove strap, your own radio strap, and make the craft as simple and as accessible as possible. Like I'm talking minimal tools, I'm talking beginner skills. We're not even doing saddle stitching. We're going to be doing it the old school way of taking a scratch awl and punching holes every 5-6 millimeters and just getting, like I said, those quick wins to make sure that folks enjoy the craft. And
Yeah,
when
and
people get to
I think
take
it's important.
when people get to take these courses, I'm not coming out and saying this is everything you need. This is just exactly what you need. If you're making a helmet shield, you don't need to use one of those expensive edge creasers or that expensive edge paint, or how to get the right box stitching or butt stitching. I can show you exactly what you need to get that quick win, that helmet shield that you're going to take to a fire and burn up and say, yeah, I did it. Like I still have I one of my first helmet shields, I shriveled it up. I'm talking like I've never seen leather burnt that badly. And it's a point of pride because I'm like, dude, I made this and I took it to a bad spot and I came out, and that's a hell of a story. It's awesome. And it's
I will say though, there was a lot of trial and error and money spent. Like for me to get to where I am with edge paint, I've spent several $100s probably on just random paints and additives and finishers and all these things to get to the point of using Giardini like all the time. Like I've used so many different companies and tried it on tons of different leather pieces. Like I've sat there for hours on just scrap pieces.
yeah.
And you're right, you don't need to use all that stuff. But once you find the stuff that works the best for what you're going to use, you save so much money. And I think that's the goal of what we try to do and try to share with people is these are the things like for me, I tend to use it mostly on vegetable tan leather, and I found Giardini to be the best for me. Now, it's not going to be the best for everybody, but I find their base, like that base coat you put on. Have you ever used
I
Giardini?
have not.
So they have like this like dense base coat. Well, you don't do much edge
Well,
painting really. You're more of like painting on top of
and
stuff.
that's the thing. Like that's why if you're listening to this and you are interested in the fire service side of things, these are things that you don't have to worry about because the way that, and I take great pride when I make my helmet shields, for example, in my edges, right? I bevel them and I sit there and I use a burnisher and I get them as glassy as I can because it's a tiny detail, but for me, it creates that flow. And there's some folks out there that will definitely school me in the art of finishing edges, but that's because that's their thing, right? You can show up with a good looking helmet shield with an okay edge with just using water, a regular Phoebing's dye, and a regular hand burnisher. That's it. No crazy tools, no crazy paints. And
It all depends on the leather you're using
I
too.
mean,
That's the most
right? That's
important
that's
thing.
that's the key. You need to have a good leather, and that's what I'm. My whole purpose with TJ Leather for years has been serving the firefighting community by providing them the products. And I'm hitting 10 years both in the fire service and in the leather crafting world. And we traditionally look at the 10-year mark as the downhill, right? I can retire at 20 years on the job. Everything is downhill from now. Now is the time for me to start thinking about that legacy, right? I'm not going to be able to do firefighting forever. Bones are going to get brittle. I'm going to start, my body's just eventually going to give out. Same with leather crafting, right? The arthritis is going to take over, and there's just going to come a point that I have to hang it up. Before I get to that point, I want to share this knowledge. So the fire service leathercraft community is traditionally very close. I'm not a fan of how people just hoard their knowledge. They're like, this is my process. This is, you know, I designed this radio holster. And I'm like, homie, that is a tiny basket out of leather that people have been making for eons. I guarantee you, some Egyptian out there thousands of years ago building the pyramids had a little leather basket where they carried whatever. Right. So we're Johnny come latelys when it comes to the fire service leather game. And I think it's pretty selfish to say, this is my process and my process only, and nobody can have it. It also comes from a mindset of scarcity, right? I'm happy teaching people
Yeah.
how to do how I do things. And I'm not worried that they're going to take over my business for multiple reasons. Number one, I've been doing this for 10 years, bro. Like I've been rocking at this and climbing over those obstacles for 10 years. So that person, if they come in with crappy intentions to take over my business, they have at least 10 years worth of work. But most importantly, there's so much work out there for everybody, right? If I was outfitting my entire small department with leather, I would be busy for the next few years. So I'm not worried. There's enough slices of the pie. And I'm approaching the fire service. I'm approaching leathercraft with that abundance mindset of I have something that I can teach and leave a legacy with. I would much rather somebody look back on me 10, 15 years from now and be like, hey, TJ taught me how to do this, instead of being like, yeah, well, TJ kind of has his own way and he's kind of a dick about it and doesn't show anybody how to do it. I got lucky. I got good mentors coming up, and I'm taking it very seriously. That is now my turn to be that mentor to people, to continue the craft and to continue this legacy, because there will come a point that I can't do it anymore, and I want people to take their own creativity and just make it even better. I always keep thinking, if there's somebody out there who's going to buy one of my courses, is going to take one of my classes, that is going to revolutionize the industry, and I'm so excited about it, because that's what we need. We just need that constant fresh blood, if you will, right? We need that constant evolution, and I am pumped to be able to kind of jumpstart that, because we've been traditionally so closed in the community, and it just I don't like it. I want to make it a fun, enjoyable experience like I've had.
Yeah, no, I feel bad. I feel like I never like have these like beefing battles that you like talk about. Like I don't know where you're hanging out, like what deep sides of the internet, but like I've only like encountered like just really like nice, like lovely
Well, and
people.
I
Like
think you're painting me in this light that I am some brawler that just, I like kick the door open to
well,
my office.
people when you go back and listen to this, you're gonna like be like, okay, like it comes across like everybody's out there just yelling and screaming about stuff. I'm like,
There's
I don't know. I feel like people are really kind. Like they're really nice.
They are. You have when you listen closely and you read closely, you just realize that a lot of the things people are saying, that there's no foundation behind. And again, I'm not trying to take a shot at the leather crafting community. I am definitely taking a shot at the fire service leathercraft community, because again, it angers me how close we are. I have a great mentor in Spencer from Axe and All Leather. Like, the dude has sat down with me for hours teaching me how he does things. We're like BSing about the business. He and his wife and his family have a brick and mortar store in Waynesville, North Carolina. Like, the dude is living the dream. He started making fire service leather items on the side, left the fire department, opened up his own brick and mortar store, and is now a pillar of his community. And he's doing so by being open and candid and just very welcoming to beginners, to outsiders. And we need more of that, especially in our sub niche, in people who are willing to, like I said, learn from something, but don't take it as gospel. And that's sort of like that's my thing. Yeah, it might come across as a little fighty, but if you manage to find some of these discussions that I'm in, I'm never angry. I'm never like, I'm always very much kind of like when we were talking about the clicker press. I'm like, hey bro, this is what works for me. I'm challenging you to think about different ways of doing things. It might work for you, it might not. There's only one way to find out. It's just to try it.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think it's been a really kind of unique journey. And I think what's cool for me is that like there's just so much that I still don't know. I think, there's something kind of unique about learning from all the people that you talk with and, growing from that. I think there's something kind of really rewarding about that each person kind of brings a little bit more to my crafting journey of how I make things and how I approach things. And I learn things honestly every conversation, which is kind of the most rewarding part. Which is why like there's certain things I always like to ask too. Like, I think there's two questions I always find interesting is what was the small tool and large tool slash machine that changed the game for you? Like, were there two things that kind of like moved the needle in how you made products?
That move the needle. So we'll start big. We'll start at the class 4. And
Yeah.
that was just a time saver. That it changed my mindset going into finishing a shield that would normally take me, half an hour to stitch by hand. Now I can do it in under 5 minutes. I mean, hell, I can do it in probably like 2 minutes. And that's a huge time saver because in my mind, I am no longer looking at that shield as like, oh God, I have to spend the next half hour of my life stitching. Now it's like, hey, one more step, boom, 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 done. Moving on to the next one. And just being able to produce more and serve more people. I'm coming into this whole business, into the whole leather crafting world out of a willingness and a desire to serve others, to make them feel good when they're wearing the gear, but also to give them rugged gear that will allow them to perform better. The small tool for me, it didn't really move the needle that much, but again, it changed that mindset. And honestly, I have to say it's that like handheld crappy Tandy burnisher. And I say that because early on it taught me the value of paying attention to those small details. Because even the first shield I took, I sat there, I beveled it, I wet the edge, I dyed it, and I just burnished away, 5-10 minutes aside, boom, 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 try it again, keep getting it glassy, use some beeswax. Nobody's going to pay attention to those details unless they're really looking, but it puts me in that mentality of accounting for everything. And if you're a leather worker, you're going to look at it and say, whoa, this dude took the time to burnish those edges that very few people are going to see. That means he's taking pride in the craft. And that means everything else that he did has been thought out, has been structured, and has been done with as much love and care as possible.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, um, and there are certain tools, like you said, that you can actually like buy on the cheaper side that have a larger impact. The things that have the largest, return on your investment. And I think, those are like a burnisher, like a hand burnisher. That's something that, gets a ton of use for how much it costs. Or a lot of times on my edges after, putting some tokonol on there, I'll just burnish it with
Yep.
canvas, which costs next to nothing, but it makes a big difference in my finished products. And I use it almost every day. And it cost me like a
Yep.
dollar. It didn't cost me virtually anything. And I think there is certain products out there that make a big difference that cost pennies on the dollar that can change how you do work. And I think those are the things you want people to kind of have the ability to know. And the funny thing is I didn't even know about canvas for a while after I, saw everybody using the wooden burnishers, and I never really saw anybody using canvas. And then friend, put me onto it saying, "Oh yeah, I use canvas." And they're like, "I grabbed it from here." And I was like, "Oh, awesome." Like, and I tried to start using it, and it made such a
Oh
difference.
yeah. And you
Um,
feel it.
like it's just a little,
Like
yeah,
your
it makes,
fingers
and
are just like separated from the leather by this tiny layer of canvas. So you feel the change. You feel it as you burnish how much better the edges are getting. Like it ups your game for sure, that tiny little piece of cloth.
yeah, and like, the different grits of sandpaper. You can get those for next to nothing on Amazon. You can get like 300 pieces for like $10.
Hmm.
And you can go all the way up. You can go from 80 grit all the way to 5,000 grit if you have the time and energy, depending on what you really want to do. And you can you have the ability for next to nothing to create the most beautiful edge of your
Oh,
life.
absolutely.
you know it's like, it's how much time you want to invest in it, but it's not the price or the value that makes it. um and I agree with you. I think the machine definitely moved, the needle for me as well. I think it's when it's all about efficiency depending on what your products are. um and I think that's a really important thing. When you look at TJ Leather, where do you see it personally and professionally in 5 years?
So I already alluded to this, and we'll start
Yeah, the academy. Yeah.
with the professional side of things because that's going to dictate a lot of what I do personally in the next 5 years. I've slowly made that shift from a business to more of a service, meaning I want to keep scaling the business so that I can better serve my customers. And that starts with you showing up to the website, having the ability to basically build your own helmet shield online. And what you see on the screen is what you get. But throughout that entire journey, you're getting updates. You are in the loop. You are just feeling like you are along for that journey instead of giving me the money and eventually you get a product. That's very transactional to me, and I'm not a fan. And I'd rather have that personal relationship with my customers, with my people, with my community. And in order to do that, I need to continue scaling the company. I need to keep hitting those 6-figure revenue years consistently to keep building the company and to keep scaling it. And there's a difference between in my from between growth and scale, right? You say I want to keep growing
Yeah,
the company. Yeah, that means you grow your revenue, but your expenses also grow. Whereas I look at scaling as being able to grow that revenue while just streamlining my processes and keeping the same costs, or making sure the revenue grows faster than the cost. I need to continue, like I said, that customer journey, that customer experience, so that I can make that lasting impact on the fire service and on the leather crafting world as a whole. And that's why I'm pushing so hard for the Leathercraft Academy. The listeners that want to get involved with this, I'll putting up a 10% discount code, LeatherPod. So put that on there. You get 10% off the courses because I want you in. I want you to follow how I did the journey, but like make your own and to experience the highs and the lows and the excitement that comes from this craft. And that ties in to the
definitely.
personal aspect because as I slowly move away from the physical product world into being able to teach, into being able to leave that legacy, that's going to be opening up more time for me to keep nourishing and building my relationships and friendships. My girlfriend Michelle and I love to travel. We actually, on a whim, the other day, we decided we're going to go to the Netherlands with my parents, and that's that's what I want to do. There's a lot of life out there to live, and there's a whole big world to explore, and I'm going to be out there doing it. Like it in 5 years, I want to sit back down with you and be like, dude, I have visited 30 countries and counting, and these are the adventures I've done, and these are the numbers of people that I have helped get into leathercraft and build their stuff, and hell, like scale their own business, create their own business.
Yeah, no, I think that's meaningful, and I think it's enjoying the all the aspects of life. I think there's so much to it, and I think I hope we continue to have guests and people and learn and find out what their journey looks for them. So I really appreciate you jumping on. I think people learned a lot about firefighting industry that they probably didn't know. Now they know, and they learned a little bit more about the craft and what they can buy and what can help them out. So where can everybody find you on social and your website?
Okay, so I am mostly active on Instagram at TJ_leather. Facebook is also up there, but that's one of those things that it just gets fed automatically from Instagram. The website, my main one is shoptjleather.com, and the new one is leathercraftacademy.com. And that's, I mean, also TikTok, but yeah, hit me up on Instagram, hit me up on the website. There's a contact page on there. And whatever I can do, if you're a budding leather worker or if you want to talk business as an established leather worker, I'm game. I love this game. I enjoy it. The business side of thing is just as fun as the leather crafting side, and I look forward to talking to anybody who reaches out.
Well, I appreciate it. And as always, you guys can find me at I am Matt Roach on Instagram and Twitter, and Leather Shop Pod on Instagram, as well as leathershoppod.com. We appreciate you guys listening. And TJ, thanks for hopping on with
Of
us.
course, brother. I will be here anytime that you need me. It was a pleasure being here.